The transport shuttle's landing gear engaged with a hydraulic hiss that Jacob Morris felt through his bones. 6 months of preparation, 12 hours of faster-than-light travel, and he'd arrived at Keslan 4, a world that was technically a human colony but practically belonged to its native inhabitants. The spaceport was a study in architectural compromise. Human signage existed alongside Keslari script, doorways built tall enough for the native species but with human-height alternatives, announcements broadcast in 3 languages simultaneously creating a disorienting multilingual echo. Jacob collected his 2 bags, everything he owned that mattered, and followed immigration protocols through sections designed for human processing. The Keslari immigration officer who stamped his documentation had the distinctive elongated ears of her species, rotating independently to track sounds from multiple directions simultaneously. She studied his face with polite curiosity while her ears focused on something happening 3 booths away. Agricultural consultant, she read from his contract. Residential District 7, Building 32, mixed species housing. Her ears shifted forward, interest, Jacob thought, though his briefing materials on Keslari body language had been frustratingly incomplete. You'll be the only human in that tower. I was told the colony is integrating residential areas, Jacob said carefully. Integrating. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her ear position suggested amusement. Yes, that's the official term. Welcome to Keslan 4, Mr. Morris. Try not to accidentally poison yourself with our food. The taxi to his new apartment was driven by an automated system. Apparently, Keslari and human traffic protocols differed enough that mixing them created dangerous chaos. Jacob watched the city pass outside, architecture that felt simultaneously familiar and wrong. Everything was too tall, too narrow, designed for beings whose proportions didn't match human standard. Building 32 stood in a residential district that mixed commercial and living spaces in ways Earth zoning laws would never permit. Jacob's apartment was on the 7th floor, and the building manager, a middle-aged Keslari male named Tarith, met him in the lobby with formal courtesy and undisguised curiosity. Mr. Morris, your quarters are prepared according to human specifications. Tarith's ears tracked Jacob's movements while his eyes remained fixed on a data pad. Though I should warn you that human specifications are based on somewhat outdated information. You may find accommodations, approximate. That turned out to be generous. Jacob's apartment was built for Keslari proportions, ceilings 3 meters high, counters at chest height, furniture that looked like it had been designed for giants or perhaps very optimistic children. Someone had added a human-sized bed and lowered one counter section, but the overall effect was like living in a space built for someone else. Jacob was unpacking when he made his first critical mistake. Hungry after travel, he pulled up the food delivery application on his comm unit, selected what looked like a reasonable meal and hit confirm. Within seconds, his door chimed. Then again, and again. He opened it to find 3 Keslari neighbors standing in the hallway, their ears tilted at various angles that suggested confusion. Did you mean to broadcast that to the entire floor? The nearest one asked. I what? Your dinner order. It went to all 40 residents. Jacob's face burned. I'm so sorry I didn't. Also, another neighbor interrupted, her ears flicking forward with what might have been amusement. Grain paste with fermented vegetables is food for sick children. The human district has actual restaurants. Did you know that? By the time Jacob figured out the correct ordering protocol, 7 neighbors had stopped by offering help, advice, and increasingly concerned questions about whether he understood how to operate basic technology. The Keslari family across the hall brought him an instruction manual. For children, Jacob realized with mortification, but he thanked them anyway. That night, lying in his too large bed in his too tall room, Jacob heard sounds through the walls. Keslari language he couldn't quite understand. conversations punctuated by the subtle rustling of independently rotating ears tracking sounds he couldn't perceive. He'd become the neighborhood curiosity, the alien who needed help ordering dinner. It was going to be a long 5 years. By the end of his first week, Jacob realized his morning run had become scheduled entertainment. He'd maintained the habit since Earth, 30 minutes of jogging through whatever environment he inhabited. On Keslan 4, his route circled the residential district, and apparently watching a human deliberately exhaust himself for no practical purpose fascinated the locals. Small crowds gathered. Keslari residents paused their morning routines to observe the strange alien who ran in circles despite having nowhere urgent to reach. Their ears tracked his movements, rotating to follow his footsteps even when their eyes looked elsewhere. "Why do you do this?" a young Keslari named Prel finally asked, matching Jacob's pace with effortless strides. Keslari leg structure made them naturally efficient walkers, and what winded Jacob barely elevated Prel's respiration. "Exercise, cardiovascular health, but you have a perfectly functional transport system, and your workplace is only 2 kilometers away." Prel's ears angled in genuine confusion. "Why wear yourself out before the day begins?" Jacob tried to explain human physiology, how their bodies required regular physical stress to maintain health. Prel listened with focused attention, his ears shifting through positions that suggested he was processing something fundamentally bizarre. "Fascinating," Prel said finally. "Humans are inefficient by design and must constantly combat their own biology. I should document this." By the second week, Jacob's coffee ritual had triggered a building-wide incident. He'd brought coffee beans from Earth, precious cargo space devoted to maintaining one small connection to home. The first morning he brewed a pot, the smell filtered through the building's ventilation system. Within 10 minutes, concerned neighbors arrived checking for fires or chemical leaks. Tarith appeared at Jacob's door looking genuinely worried. "Mr. Morris, what are you burning?" "Coffee, it's a beverage, caffeinated." Tarith's ears flattened completely, the Keslari equivalent of profound shock. "You're drinking something that smells like industrial combustion." 3 Keslari children, siblings from 2 floors down, started waiting outside Jacob's door each morning specifically to smell the coffee. Their parents apologized profusely for the intrusion. Jacob just laughed and let the kids peer into his apartment, their ears perked forward in absolute fascination. Shopping proved his greatest challenge. The local market operated on Keslari organizational logic that made no sense to human perception. Items weren't grouped by type, but by what Jacob eventually understood was chemical composition and seasonal availability. What he thought was produce section turned out to include decorative materials, building supplies, and what might have been art. He purchased bread, or what looked like bread, turned out to be compressed fiber material for furniture construction. Sella, the young vendor who sold it to him, laughed openly when he returned the next day to complain. "You ate it." Her ears rotated with delight. "Actual consumption. I tried, got about 2 bites before realizing." She spent the next hour teaching him basic shopping protocols, pointing out visual markers he'd missed, explaining categorization systems that seemed designed to confuse aliens specifically. Other vendors started offering help, samples, exaggerated patience usually reserved for children. Word spread. The human who didn't know what food was, but something shifted. Residents who'd watched with distant curiosity now approached with advice, with solutions, with genuine desire to help him navigate their world. Myra, the Keslari botanist from his floor, left instructional notes under his door explaining which garden plants were safe for human consumption. Another neighbor modified a chair to human proportions and left it anonymously. Jacob realized he'd become more than entertainment. He'd become a project, a communal responsibility. And somehow, despite the constant mistakes and cultural confusion, that felt less lonely than he'd expected. Jacob's dinner party was a disaster. but at least it was a well-intentioned disaster. After weeks of his neighbor's help, he wanted to reciprocate. He invited 5 residents to dinner, determined to share human cuisine and culture. He adapted recipes for Keslari ingredients that seemed similar to Earth equivalents. He set his too-tall table with careful attention to Keslari dining customs he'd researched. The food was objectively terrible. He watched his guests eat with ears progressively flattening, the Keslari expression of polite endurance. They finished their portions through sheer determination, praising his creative approach and interesting textures, with the diplomatic care of people trying desperately not to offend. Tereth stayed after the others left, his ears tilted in sympathetic angles. "Mr. Morris, Jacob, your hospitality is appreciated, but you should know that Keslari taste perception operates on completely different principles than human. What you season for your palate," he paused diplomatically, "registered as aggressively acidic to us, possibly mildly caustic." Jacob's mortification was complete. "I poisoned you." "Mildly irritated our digestive systems," Tereth corrected gently. "The intention was clear. That matters more than execution." The music incident was worse. Jacob played his favorite Earth songs one evening, volume low, just enjoying familiar sounds in an alien place. Within minutes, his comm unit exploded with emergency messages. His entire floor evacuated. Residents fled with ears pinned flat, some looking genuinely distressed. Myra appeared at his door wearing sonic dampening gear usually reserved for industrial environments. "Jacob, what are you broadcasting?" "Music. Your music contains ultrasonic frequencies that are physically painful to Keslari ears." Her expression held more concern than anger. "We can perceive ranges you can't hear. Those high frequencies feel like needles." Jacob shut down his system immediately, horrified. But instead of complaints or demands he leave, his neighbors treated it as a problem to solve collectively. Sella brought acoustic dampening materials from her family's construction business. The Keslari engineer from floor 3, a quiet individual named Corval, offered to install frequency filters on Jacob's entertainment system. They turned his mistake into a community project, working together to make his apartment safe for both human entertainment and Keslari comfort. "We don't expect you to know everything," Myra explained while helping install dampening panels. "You're the first human most of us have met. We're learning about you as much as you're learning about us." Jacob started studying Keslari culture with genuine dedication. Their ear-based communication contained nuances that human language missed entirely, positions and rotations that conveyed emotional subtext. Their social hierarchies operated on principles of community contribution rather than individual achievement. Their 3-day naming ceremonies and 12-hour work cycles and elaborate food rituals that made human customs seem simplistic by comparison. But his neighbors asked equally curious questions. Why did he sleep 8 hours when Keslari required only 4? Why did he eat 3 times daily instead of their single elaborate meal? Why did he keep photographs, flat images of people he claimed to miss but couldn't actually interact with? The fascination became mutual, not just observation but genuine exchange. Jacob wasn't an oddity to study, but a bridge to understanding a completely different way of being conscious, of experiencing reality, of building meaning from existence. One evening, Prel, the young Keslari who'd questioned his running, appeared at his door with what looked like a musical instrument. "I've been studying human audio perception," Prel said, his ears angled in what Jacob had learned meant excited anticipation. "I composed something that should work within your hearing range. Would you listen?" Jacob listened. The music was strange, beautiful, operating on harmonic principles that felt almost but not quite familiar, and he understood. This was reciprocity. This was a Keslari trying to bridge the gap from the other direction. "It's beautiful," Jacob said honestly. Prel's ears perked fully forward, pure delight. "We're not so different that we can't share this. That's worth knowing." 6 months in, Jacob barely noticed the transformation. He'd become part of the building's fabric, woven into daily routines that felt natural despite their strangeness. He joined the communal garden committee despite knowing nothing about Keslari botany. Myra patiently explained their cultivation methods while trying to understand why human agricultural techniques emphasized yield over longevity. Somehow his terrible plant care produced thriving vegetables, and the Keslari botanist studied his methods with fascination, accidentally discovering that human approaches to soil composition optimized growth in unexpected ways. His morning runs now included a dozen Keslari who'd started joining out of curiosity. They didn't understand the purpose, but they enjoyed the social aspect, the communal activity that brought diverse residents together. The sight of mixed species jogging group became neighborhood legend. The children who'd watched him with cautious interest now treated him like an eccentric uncle. They'd arrive at his door with questions about Earth, about humans, about why he only had 2 ears that couldn't rotate and how did he possibly track multiple conversations. Then Tarith approached with a request that terrified him. The building is hosting a cultural festival. The residents have voted they'd like you to present human customs. Jacob stared. I'm not qualified to represent humanity. You represent the humanity we know, Tarith countered, his ears angled with gentle insistence. The one that fumbles shopping and makes painful music and runs in circles for no reason. The one that tries despite constant confusion. That humanity is worth celebrating. His neighbors helped him prepare. Myra translated his presentation into grammatically correct Keslari. Sela sourced ingredients for simple human foods that wouldn't assault Keslari palates. Corval built a presentation system with proper frequency filtering. The festival arrived too quickly. Jacob stood before a crowd of residents, Keslari who'd watched him fumble through basic existence, who'd witnessed his mistakes and helped him recover, who'd turned his strangeness into something valuable. He talked about Earth, about human diversity, the thousands of cultures and languages and ways of being human. He talked about loneliness, about being the only one of your kind surrounded by people fundamentally different. When I moved here, he said in careful Keslari, I thought I was relocating to a new planet. But I wasn't just changing location. I was learning to be human in a place where humanity meant something different. You didn't tolerate my presence. You made my strangeness worth celebrating. He showed images from Earth, cities and oceans, and the impossible diversity of human existence. His neighbors listened with ears forward, absorbing not just information but the gratitude behind it. After his presentation, Tarith made an announcement. The building had voted to officially designate itself as a cross-species community facility. Jacob's presence had proved that differences strengthened rather than divided. The festival continued. Keslari and the handful of other humans present sharing food, music filtered through proper frequencies, stories that bridged worlds. Prel performed his human-compatible composition.